Hello and welcome to Keep Coding. In this video, we are going to see how to create a React application without using Redux or other state management packages. We are just going to use React and its own state management features like context and hooks. Okay, so there were olden days where React was only doing this UI related stuff, and the state management was done by third-party libraries like Redux or MobX or some other libraries are there. Okay, but that's not the case anymore. When context came out, it was addressing a lot of state management issues, but then it was not very much usable till hooks came out. Hooks made using context very easy, and after that, currently there is no need to go for a third party package. There are reasons like testability and code maintenance, but then from development point of view, everything that is possible with Redux or MobX is already possible with the basic React. So now I have a newly created application here, so I just created it using white instead of create React app, but then this is just a simple application, and it is not having any other dependency. Okay, so if you see it's package.json, I'm not having anything else other than React. But then now I'm going to add bootstrap just for UI purposes. Okay, now we have bootstrap. Let's go back and remove this entire code. Okay, so I'm just going to create the UI now. It is going to be a simple to do application like in any other example, but then now we are going to use the state management of context and hooks, and we'll explain how it should grow, and we'll also address the performance related concerns. So in the app, I'm just going to create a new component named to-do list app, and I'm going to create to-do list app.jsx, and here's the component to-do list app. Okay, so it is going to contain a div, and then within it, it is going to have two components: to-do list form for adding a new item to the to-do list. It will be having only an input and a button to add it, and to-do list display. Okay, now let's create these two components: to-do list form, and it will be taking not many props. We'll see. We'll be taking everything from the context now, so we'll not be directly taking anything through the props. So I'm not defining any props for now. If we need it later, we'll add it. It is supposed to return a form. So I have this from React Bootstrap. Okay, so and this is going to be add and form control and change. Let's add a state. So let's bind it to the value, and then bind the on change handler. To set to do e.target.value. Okay, so this is the form, and we're gonna need one more component. Okay, and this one is to-do list display. Okay, and this one is going to use a list Yeah, this one. Okay, that's it. Let's try to display it and see if things are working as expected. And I have imported this. I don't need these anymore. Yeah, we haven't imported those bootstrap components, and I think button, list group, what else, input group and form control. Input group and form control from React Bootstrap. Okay, now let's run it here on dev. Yes, build is quite fast and the application didn't run. It's an issue. So to-do list app is not defined. We have it because we haven't imported it. For some reason, my VS Code is not identifying these things. I just need to find out what went wrong. Okay. Again, to-do list app is not defined. It's my bad. Okay, that's it. Use state is not defined. Okay, so now we have everything, but then we don't have the styles. That is because we have to import the styles. So I just need to import this style sheet into the main app. Okay, so now we got a simple application where we have a form and then a list. Let me add a little bit of margin to it. I think M2 is fine. Okay, so now I'll be able to change anything and I'll be able to click add. So it should be adding to this list of items. Okay, so now the state management is going to come. So we are going to store all these to-do list items and then the actions as well. We have this add action, and if time persists we'll add a till it. So let's go back and create a context. Okay, so for now I'll just create a context here. Const to-do context is equal to react.create context. Okay, so it is going to have an empty object at first, and these has to be provided by a component. So I'm going to create a component. So this will be like to do context provider. So this will have all the state as well as the actions. This is what we are going to consume from outside. Okay, so this is a component, and this has to take the props so that we can return to do context dot provider, and within it we'll be giving props dot children. Okay, and here we have to give a value for the context. So we have to define an object here, and that is what we're going to pass in the value. So initially we'll need a state. Okay, so I'm just going to give a new state. I'm going to say to do's, and it will be an empty array. Okay, so this is going to contain the list of to do items. Okay, and then we are going to have an action like add to do, which will get a to do item. And then what it will do, it will just set to do's implies. So I'm gonna add it to as the first item. So I'm just gonna keep to do comma s. Okay, so that's it. So you have an action here. This will be adding to this set to do's whenever you are giving a to do. So I'm not trying to expose this set to do outside this, so that's why I have created an add to do. Okay, so in the values I'm going to give to do's comma add to do. Okay, now this is supposed to be an object. Okay, and this object contains two items. One is the to-do list, and the other one is the add to do, and this will be available to all the children within this context. Okay, so now I just need to import this here to the context provider, and this is going to be covering that entire application, so that anywhere if you're trying to use the context, you'll be using this state. Okay, so that the entire application is having this state. So now we have the context, everything wired up, and we have to use this context here. Okay, so at one end I need to use the to-do list, and the other end I have to use the add action. Okay, so how we are going to do it, we have this use context hook. So I'm just going to say that use context, and for this I have to export the context provider, not just the context provider but the context. Okay, so I'm importing this. Okay, so and that will be having to-dos list. Okay, but here I won't need the to-dos list, but I'll be needing add to do. Okay, so whenever this button is being pressed, I'm going to say that on click of this button you have to do add to do of whatever is existing in this to do. Okay, so I'm giving it here. Now similarly I need to wire the context into this list display, and here I just need the list. So I'll be saying to do is equal to use context, sorry, to do context. Okay, so now this is an array. I just have to wrap this within a map, to do's dot map. So x implies this list item, so that you're getting everything from the context. Okay, so now we have everything. I just have to render the x here. Okay, so let's see how this works. Okay, a lot of errors. Use context is not defined. Yes, use context is not defined here. Okay, yeah, so now we have an empty input box as well as an empty list item. Okay, clean things, add. Yeah, so now we're getting it. Okay, one more. Okay, now this is it. So we have a common context, and this context will be available in how many level of hierarchy you are in. Okay, so if you are into 10 components deep, or you have a very big application which is being surrounded by this provider, then this data will be available throughout. So usually this will go into a separate file, and this will keep growing just like an object or any other store or state management. For example, if you are using mobx, you'll have a class which contains all those actions and states. Okay, and similarly this will grow. Okay, so this will start to have a delete to do, and then this will start to have all sorts of states and derivations as well. For example, if you want to see completed to-do list, then you will have a derivation of this to-dos using a useMemo. So now there are some performance downsides for doing this. For example, here this will return a new object every time this context is being rendered. Now if you see here, we have this object notation which will create a new object every time this is being rendered, okay, and this context provider is at the topmost level, so which will cause a re-render for the entire application, even when there is no changes actually within the values of this. So this is where we have to use a use callback and use memo. So this should not be created again and again, so we need a use callback, and I'm wrapping it within this, and this use callback has to be re-rendered again whenever to do's and set to do's change, okay. And similarly, I'm going to have a value object which is going to be use memo of this object to do's and add to do, and this has to be recalculated every time to do's and add to do change, okay. So this way you just make sure that we don't have unnecessary re-renders just because the context is at the top and it is returning a new object every time, okay. So now I'll just replace this with the value object, okay. Let's just, oh my bad, this is supposed to be a callback, not an object. So this is supposed to return to do's comma add to do, okay, not this one. Let's test this. Okay, now 1, 2. Okay, so that's it. So the advantage here is that unlike Redux, you're not going to have a single store, okay. A single store is not always maintainable, so I can have a to-do context provider like this, and then if you're having an authentication and user, then you'll have something like a user provider at the top of it, and which will be used by all the components, not just by all the components but by this other context as well. You can use the use context here and then subscribe to the user, and then you can use the user in your API calls, everything. You can have all the API calls within this context and then let the other components just consume it. So in this way, if you're doing this way, then your components will be having only the UI. It will not be having the business logics, everything. The business logic will be hidden behind this context, okay. So that is a great way to maintain your application. Say if you're having a very big application, there is a good chance that you'll have some 10 or 20 stores, not beyond that, okay. That is enough for you to split all those functionalities into different stores and maintain all those stores. And one more advantage is that if this context is not needed at the topmost level, you have a sub part of the application which is what is going to use that context, then you can just use it just there. So the advantage is that when this context is going out of the tree, okay, so you are navigating into a page and then you are coming out of the page, then the context within that page will die and all the memory used by that context will be removed automatically. This is not the case with Redux. So if you have a store and as you go through different pages, the store keeps growing because most of the people don't do the cleanup when the page is coming out, okay. So when you have a component unmounting is happening, you're supposed to clean up the Redux with whatever data that you populated, but that's not the case, right? So the application state keeps growing as the user stays within the application, but here that is taken care automatically. So this will solve a lot of issues. For example, in Redux, if you're coming out of a page and then you're going back to the page, then if you're not having the states correctly maintained, then that will that can create issues. But here that's not the case. When you're going to that page, only the context will come alive and it will have the default values and it will do the API calls if necessary. So context is a wonderful solution, especially when you're considering the tree nature of the components, and how these data are dependent on different components and different subtrees of the component. And even if you are using other state management applications, even Redux is using context at the root, and you can come up with your own stuffs as well. You can create a global object and then make the context interact with it. You can create complicated stuffs. For example, you can create a single context and make the context talk to the backend via WebSocket, and you can update the state within the context which will be reflecting in the applications automatically. This is kind of giving the reactivity for the entire application. So that's it. Try doing it this way and let me know your feedback, how you are seeing it compared to Redux, where you are defining actions, reducers in many files, and it is hard to maintain, and the logic is scattered. Here the data and the actions are kept together, but that's not the case in a normal Redux application. If you are using Redux toolkit, that's a different case. But then if you're using plain Redux, then you'll have separate files for action types, actions, and then reducers, but then they will be having a common functionality. It is always a good idea from the object-oriented programming concepts that to keep the data and the related functions together, so that you'll be able to reason about it easily than keeping it separately. That's it. Please give your feedback on how this video is. I'll come up with some more state management videos. Till then, bye. Thanks for watching this.